Hi, it's Stephen T. I am a straight white male, which puts me on the bottom of the hierarchy of victimhood. As a result, the followers of identity politics tell me that I have no right to express an opinion on anything. Well, frankly, I don't care what they say. I'm not intimidated by the fascist identity politicians. I have as much right to my opinions as anyone else, especially as my opinions are based on evidence and an open mind, and not on my feelings, my wishes, or my desires. The thing is that facts don't care about your feelings, or mine, or anyone's. So I will not allow myself to be shut down by a bunch of nincompoops who think the best way to debate is to scream at the top of their lungs whilst wearing pink vagina hats and yelling racist and fascist at me. I am neither of those things. In fact, just like Hitler's brown shirts or Mussolini's black shirts, the identity politicians have a fear of debate. They just want to shut down those who disagree with them, rather than trying to change our minds with reasoned arguments, because they have no facts to bring to an argument. And just like Hitler's brown shirts and Mussolini's black shirts, they are the true fascists. And it is they who say I have no right to an opinion because I am white, who are the true racists. I do not believe in identity politics. I believe in individualism. I believe that I and I alone am responsible for my own actions and my own decisions, and not for anyone else's. So despite being a straight white male, I'm going to talk to you in this video about slavery, and I shall be giving facts and expressing opinions, and you can yell racist and fascist at me all you like, but I shan't care, and I shan't listen until you give me facts that refute the evidence that I'm about to present. You hoarders, frankly, are murdering bastards. It's about time you realise what arseholes you really are in difficult times, in really difficult times. We Brits, and I think you'll find the same was in every country. We came together as a community and looked after our weak and vulnerable. Okay, so first of all, it would be nice if we could start on some common ground. I think that we can all agree that slavery is evil. Well, actually, not everyone does agree, because there is still slavery in the world today, but I'll come back to that. So when did slavery begin? Slavery has been around since the dawn of humanity. Slavery began when mankind first fought rivals for territory. And here's some news for you. Slavery was not invented by the white man and for the white man. Every culture, every race on the planet has used slavery. One of the earliest known evidences of slavery is found 3,500 years ago in Mesopotamia, what is now modern-day Iraq, Iran, and parts of Syria and Turkey. Now, I want you just to pause there. Was Mesopotamia populated by white people or by brown people? And who hasn't heard of Thermopylae, when in 480 BC, 300 Spartans held the pass at Thermopylae against 300,000 Persian soldiers? Persia, which had a large empire, is now known as Iran. So brown people were trying to invade and enslave white people and build an empire. The Roman Empire took slaves from all over the world, both white and non-white. And what about the biggest empire the world has ever known? Do you know who that was? Yep, that's right, you guessed it. It was the Mongols. Their empire lasted from around 1206 until it divided in 1271 into various factions and finally wound up in the late 14th century. Surprise, surprise, these non-white people had slaves. Admittedly, these slaves were valued for their professional skills and were not just used for manual or sexual work. The point is, these non-white Mongols held white and non-white slaves. Let's take Ethiopia. Slavery in Ethiopia persisted until 1942. The Anti-Slavery Society estimated that there were 2 million slaves in the early 1930s out of an estimated population of between 8 and 16 million. It was finally abolished by order of the Emperor Haile Selassie on the 26th of August 1942. So let's talk about the Barbary pirates. The Barbary slave trade started in the 8th century when the Muslims conquered the Iberian Peninsula as part of Islam's imperial ambitions. They call it a caliphate, but that's just another name for an empire. It's best known, the Barbary pirate thing is best known from the 16th century onwards when they extended their operations. At that time, the Barbary coast of North Africa came under the Ottoman Empire, yet another empire by non-white people. You may have noticed that. Conveniently ignored by those who blame whites for every evil on the planet and who seem to think that only whites had ambitions to build empires. In the 250 years from 1530 to 1780, it is said that around 1.25 million slaves were captured from the coast of Italy, Spain, Great Britain, and as far as Iceland. A case of non-white people enslaving white people. But shush, don't tell anyone, you might offend the left. The Congolese historian Elkia Mukobolo, I'm sorry, I may very well have mispronounced that, in his book, published in 1998, Le Monde Diplomatique, said, and I quote, "The African continent was bled of its human resources via all possible routes, across the Sahara, through the Red Sea, from the Indian Ocean ports and across the Atlantic. At least 10 centuries of slavery for the benefit of the Muslim countries, from the 9th to the 19th century." End quote. A case of non-white people enslaving other non-white people. When the British arrived in northern Nigeria at the turn of the 20th century, approximately 2 to 2.5 million people there were slaves. Slavery in northern Nigeria wasn't finally outlawed until 1936. And this might shock you. In Ghana, today, the slave trade continues. If you want to learn more about this, go to freetheslaves.net. This is Richard. Poverty and ignorance forced Richard's grandmother to traffic him into slavery. He spent 7 years as a child slave on Lake Volta, along with many other young children. At his grandmother's funeral, he saw a chance to run and was courageous enough to take that chance. And slavery continues in Senegal, Haiti, the Congo, Brazil, and many other places. And there are many more examples. But everyone ignores them. The only slave trade that anyone wants to talk about is the transatlantic slave trade. So let's talk about the transatlantic slave trade. Shock horror. It was not the first, nor the last, nor the longest running slave trade, as I have illustrated above, despite what the left and those who want to blame everyone else for their shortcomings will tell you. Shockingly, to my mind, this includes some university professors. The transatlantic trade in human misery was undoubtedly evil. But how did it evolve? To begin with, slavery in Africa was rife. Slavery was a common practice among sub-Saharan Africans before the involvement of the Arabs, the Berbers, and the Europeans. Another fact ignored by those who would have you believe that whites are responsible for all slavery throughout the world. There were basically 3 types of slaves. There were those who were slaves through conquest, there were those who were slaves due to unpaid debts, or those whose parents gave them as slaves to tribal chiefs. It was quite common for Africans, Turks, Berbers, and Arabs to sell their captives and prisoners. When the Americas were colonized, the European colonists needed a cheap form of labor, and thus the transatlantic trade started. But it was relatively short-lived. Evil, but Britain became the first country in the world to ban slavery in 1772. The British Empire emptied its treasury because, being a democracy, it did not free the slaves after an armed conflict. It freed the slaves by Act of Parliament and paid for the freedom of every slave in the empire. Britain was followed by France and the USA, who fought a civil war to free the slaves, a war fought by white people to free black people. So what have we illustrated here? Again, we can all agree that slavery is evil, but it was not started by white people for the benefit of white people. Every nation had slaves, every race had slaves, particularly in Africa and the Middle East. Europeans also took slaves. The Romans did, the Vikings did. Empires were built by the Mongols, the Turks, Islam, Persia, as well as European countries. But it was the Europeans who either fought wars or paid money to bring slavery to an end wherever they governed, whereas in many African and Eastern countries slavery still exists today. And as for reparations, apart from the arguments such as "I wasn't there and nor were you," we also have the argument that whites freed their slaves, and whites are paying foreign aid all over the world and have been doing for many years. But mainly, whites are not the villains here. Everyone deserves blame, and if white Americans pay reparations to black Americans, will those black Americans use that money to pay reparations to black Africans, or will they also demand reparations from those black Africans who sold their brothers into slavery? And who should pay? The children of slave owners or everybody? If Americans' current wealth was built on slavery, which it wasn't, then all Americans, including the African American, are currently benefiting from the opportunities afforded by that wonderful country. So, there you have it. Hi, I'm Stephen, and I hope this video gave you some food for thought. If you'd like to see more of the same, please subscribe. See ya.